Wonderful. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very proud that all of you have made it here during Congress Day, part 2. Day 2 is always very difficult to actually get up and get into the auditoria. But I would hope that the subject matter that we're going to be discussing today in this particular room is very close to your heart. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you know that at the European Development Days, we are actually eager to have your views and opinions. We'll have that sort of in a later part. We'll, let me just fill you in, we'll have 2 keynote speeches. We'll have sort of the European view, we'll have the African view, and then I'll invite the panel to come up on stage, and we'll start a discussion with putting the views and statement forward first. Then, ladies and gentlemen, it's all up to you that we're going to have a proper, lively debate. So mark my words, yes, you can chip in at any one point. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that you sort of had time to listen in on our film, our little video. And you remember that more than once, if you had listened to it more than once, there was the mention that it's 1 billion people who are actually either suffering from hunger, from malnutrition, or something else. And ladies and gentlemen, it's early in the morning, but can I actually ask the first 3 rows of the people that are here in the room to get up on this side? All of you, could you just do me the favor and get up? Okay. You might just think that's gymnastics early in the mornings, but it isn't. This is just a demonstration. This is a 1/7 or an 1/8 of the population present in the room. Now, if you take that to a world scale, those are the people that we condemn to either hunger or to malnutrition and therefore less chances in life. So we can change that, which means, ladies and gentlemen, you can all sit down again. But this was just a kind of demonstration. Now, how can we resolve that? Some people, some scientists actually say that, yes, we can feed the world even in 2050 when we estimate 9 billion people. But what do we do on the way there? One of the aspects that we're going to be discussing today, we cannot continue in the old silo thinking. What we need is partnerships, and we need better and balanced working partnerships. So that is the outset, that is what we're going to be discussing. And in order to get into the discussion, of course, it would be quite important to hear the view and voices both from Europe and from Africa. Now, ladies and gentlemen, talking about partnerships, may I just point out that even in a Development Day context, it is quite unusual that 5 organizations get together and say, yes, we have one common goal, and therefore we are going to organize one panel together. So maybe actually right at the beginning you should give these 5 organizations that got together a particular applause, because at the end you might not want to do it if you're not happy with the outcome of the debate. So it was the GIZ, it was COLE-ACP, it was UNIDO, it was AFD, and I know that I've forgotten somebody, it was the SNVs. So maybe those 5 organizations can get a little applause. Well done. Which gives me the chance to turn to our first keynote speaker. I don't know whether you come from a sort of government organization or whether you come from an NGO, and the European policy has always been sort of marked with a question mark. They always thought, and we've always thought, that whatever DEFCO builds up might be sort of thrown around by the other side, i.e. by the agriculturist. Now, apparently things have changed. That is at least my information this year. So one of the most important aspects of criticism has been stopped this summer. The subsidies to exports from the European Union have been stopped. We don't have the barriers so high anymore for imports into the EU. In fact, some assistance is being made to African farmers to actually bring their produce into the EU. And of course, food price volatility is being monitored very closely. of course, we're going to monitor very closely whether that's actually going to take place with the wished-for effect. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commissioner was announced in your papers or on the internet. He was not able to come, but we have probably the man who knows much better, because usually it's the Director Generals that sort of, push forward the policies. So, Jesse Plever, please take us into the issue, and maybe he can also get a little bit of an applause.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Madame et Messieurs. Notre commissaire Dacian Ciolos, à cause des empêchements de dernière minute, n'a pas pu participer aujourd'hui à ce débat important. Il m'a demandé de vous adresser. Je suis honoré d'avoir cette opportunité de dire quelques mots sur les défis qui sont vis-à-vis de nous dans le contexte de coopération sur l'agriculture avec les pays en développement. Les jours de développement européen, le forum excellent et le moment exceptionnel, c'est aujourd'hui pour discuter comment nourrir les changements. L'agriculture européenne et mondiale évolue beaucoup. Comme nous avons entendu dire juste maintenant, il y a eu beaucoup de changements dans l'agriculture européenne, dans la PAC, politique agricole commune. Et pas seulement les éléments spectaculaires comme la réduction ou même l'élimination des restitutions à l'exportation. Je vais vous dire que depuis longtemps, la Commission européenne a mis le niveau de restitution à exportation au très bas niveau. Et ces restitutions n'ont pas été appliquées vers les pays en développement. Mais comme c'était dit aujourd'hui, vraiment à partir du mois de juillet, les restitutions sont mises à zéro. C'est aussi dans le contexte de la réforme pour l'année 2014-2020. Il n'y aura pas de possibilité de mettre à nouveau restitution à l'exportation, sauf les cas de crise ou de problèmes sur les marchés agricoles exceptionnels. Donc je pense que c'est une très bonne nouvelle, mais je voudrais aussi souligner que l'Union européenne, depuis plusieurs années, est le plus grand importateur de produits agricoles et avant tout l'importateur de produits de provenance des pays en développement. L'Union européenne importe plus que 5 grands pays comme les États-Unis, Japon, Canada. Donc nous sommes vraiment ouverts et les barrières pour les produits de provenance des pays en développement sont très bas ou même mis à zéro. Et il y a plusieurs exemples de l'accord et des initiatives de la Commission européenne sur ce sujet. L'agriculture européenne évolue rapidement et c'est l'opportunité considérable, mais aussi défi considérable. S'il s'agit d'opportunités, c'est avant tout l'opportunité pour lutter contre la faim, faire reculer l'insécurité alimentaire dans le contexte de l'augmentation de la demande. Et c'est l'opportunité aussi de lutter contre la pauvreté. L'agriculture constitue la base économique de 60 à 70% des personnes touchées par la pauvreté dans le monde. Les défis sont en grande partie liés aux opportunités. Avant tout, l'intérêt de plus en plus grand de nouveaux investisseurs pour la terre cultivable. Ce phénomène que nous observons maintenant dans les différentes régions du monde, c'est aussi le risque pour les population locale et pour les petits agriculteurs. Et avant tout, la pression sur les ressources, cette pression est importante avant tout concernant l'accès aux terres à l'arbre et aussi à l'eau. Il faut dire que pour nous, les défis les plus importants, c'est développer l'agriculture d'une manière durable. Pour cette raison, un agenda politique doit accompagner la dynamique en cours autour de l'agriculture avec plusieurs objectifs. Premièrement, garantir que les petits agriculteurs bénéficient de cette dynamique de croissance agricole et alimentaire dans le monde. Il faut assurer que ces petits agriculteurs ne sont pas exclus de ce processus qui peuvent aussi se profiter de ce développement du marché mondial. Et deuxièmement, il faut préserver la richesse des écosystèmes et de leur capacité à produire dans la durée. Le développement durable, c'est le mot-clé pour adresser ce sujet. Dans ce contexte, il me paraît indispensable de promouvoir une relation durable entre agro-business et la population locale pour garantir une diffusion de connaissances pour aider le business et aussi les populations locales s'enrichissent mutuellement. Il est indispensable aussi d'accompagner les pays en développement à régler en toute transparence la question du foncier, question qui dans différentes régions est question clé. D'assurer l'accès aux connaissances agronomiques, progrès technologiques aux petites exploitations familiales, ainsi que l'accès au crédit. Le défi est tellement grand qu'il faut utiliser toutes les possibilités, tous les nouveaux éléments qui sont obtenus grâce à la recherche dans le domaine agricole et agroalimentaire. Nous devons faire plus avec moins et c'est possible de faire ça seulement en utilisant les nouvelles technologies et assurer l'accès à ces nouvelles technologies pour tous les producteurs, agriculteurs, inclus les petits exploitants. Il faut d'assurer la politique agricole qui permet d'inscrire dans les durées les investissements au niveau mondial d'ensemble régionaux, national et local. Il est aussi indispensable de lutter contre les effets négatifs de la volatilité excessive des matières premières et de compter des crises économiques, sanitaires ou liées aux évolutions climatiques. Beaucoup de ces défis ont été adressés dans le contexte de la réforme de la politique agricole commune. La Commission européenne est très intéressée d'utiliser toutes les possibilités aussi de présenter ces expériences aux nos partenaires des pays de développement, en développement. S'il s'agit de transparence des marchés, nous avons fait beaucoup d'efforts au niveau international. La Commission européenne est très active pour contribuer à le système AMIS qui est développé sous FAO. Et il y a beaucoup l'autre aspect qui doit être développé en coopération avec les autres participants et nous sommes prêts de travailler ensemble sur ce sujet. L'Union européenne est ainsi pleinement engagée dans la promotion de l'année 2014 de l'agriculture familiale. Je suis convaincu que l'année 2014 sera une occasion de promouvoir le développement agricole, le développement durable de la culture. Dans la coopération avec l'Union africaine, notamment avec des initiatives pour développer la valeur ajoutée des produits agricoles, améliorer le fonctionnement des marchés, développer la capacité d'exportation ainsi que la recherche et innovation dans l'agriculture et la production agroalimentaire. Nous sommes aussi engagés dans la mise en place de programmes de coopération bilatérale solides sur le plan agricole. Je me félicite qu'environ 50 pays aient fait de l'agriculture leur secteur focal de leur coopération avec l'Union européenne pour la période 2014-2020. Pour conclure, il est absolument essentiel de mettre en cohérence nos approches politiques, commerciales et développement pour que l'ensemble de nos efforts participent à la lutte contre l'insécurité alimentaire et contre la pauvreté. Les débats d'aujourd'hui sont une occasion formidable de débattre pour faire émerger la solution de demain avec l'implication de l'ensemble des acteurs. De façon concrète, il me semble important de réfléchir en vue du sommet UE l'Afrique d'avril 2014 pour qu'il soit une nouvelle étape dans notre agenda commun pour le développement agricole. Merci pour votre attention.
Jesse, thank you very much. I know that you've got a lot to do, so as long as you can stay, you're welcome, but we have the full understanding when you have to run away. Thank you very much for rolling out the red carpet. And I'd like now to ask also, again, somebody else on stage than the name that you had on your schedule. It's Ernest Ruzindaza. He's the permanent secretary of the Rwandan Ministry for Agriculture. Would you please join me up here on stage? Not only is Ernest going to give us the African perspective, but maybe also Ernest probably talking as an agronomist, i.e. sort of as a specialist in your area, sort of the grand view. Is there something that you would describe as sort of an African vision on agriculture? Is there something like a Rwandan vision on agriculture?
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to start with Rwanda, and then I can discuss about Africa agriculture. For Rwanda, I want to say that everything starts with the vision. We have what we call Vision 2020. It's a country document that highlights the orientation, long-term orientation of the country. And that vision is actually operationalized through a country orientation, the medium-term orientation, what we call EDPRS, Economic Development and Poverty Reduction Strategy. Now we are implementing the second phase of that strategy. And that strategy is it's a 5-year strategy. And the EDPRS is also operationalized by sector strategies. As far as agriculture sector is concerned, it is operationalized by the strategy called the Strategic Plan for Agricultural Transformation. As I said, everything starts with the vision, but it needs also to have a leadership and clear ways of implementation. Coming back to the EDPRS, it's a second phase. I want to tell you that we have concluded last year our first phase of EDPRS with a success, because we have conducted also different surveys showing how we have implemented the first one, so that we can learn and see what we can do in the second one. So the first one have been concluded with a tremendous success, because we have been able to reduce poverty, 12% of poverty. We were at 61. Now with the survey that we have conducted, what we call a survey, it's a household survey, we have been able to see that 12% of poverty has been reduced. So it's around 1 million of people. So it's a tremendous achievement, and we wanted to learn from what we did for the first EDPRS to go to the second one. The second one has been discussed, has been actually validated, and we have conducted that exercise. I might say it's an exercise, but it takes like 1 year to come up with, a strong country plan, because we have to consult, beneficiaries from, the lowest level. We consulted farmers, we consulted, other, people to come up with a strategy that is owned by the country. Then, but also we consult our partners as well, because it is validated, and we put in place the ways of implementation. So it requests also, the new one also requests a strong partnership with private sector, because we have identified key areas where we need really a strong partnership of private sector. So we put in place a mechanism for coordination. When it comes to the country, how do we work with partners? How do we work with private sector? There are different forums where we sit with private sector and discuss and agree. We have what we call PPD, public-private sector dialogue. We have those dialogues, let's say 6 months. We have 2 dialogues. Those dialogues are at, let's say, country level, but also we have dialogue at sector level. For example, if we want to discuss with the private sector partners in agriculture, we conduct dialogues in the agriculture sector. But also we have other dialogues, other policy dialogues that we have with our development partners. We discuss at sector level, we discuss in sector working groups, but also we have what we call joint sector reviews. We have 2 joint sector reviews. We discuss and we check the progress of the implementation of our sector strategy. So how are we implementing the sector strategy? What are the bottlenecks, and how do we fix those bottlenecks together with our partners? And it's not only development partners, because in that joint sector review, we discuss also with the civil society and the farmers' representatives. So I think those are kind of forums where we sit, we discuss and agree and implement. And there are also other forums for coordination, for when it comes to actually commodity-based coordination. Let's say we have value chains meeting when we want to discuss on rice, for example, how we implement the rice policy, how do we implement coffee plan. So we have those kind of meetings where we discuss with our private sector federation, with banks, with cooperatives. We have some problems. How can we sit together? How do we sit together and address those issues? And always those kind of fora are facilitated by government.
It almost sounds as if the Rwandan government sees itself as a moderator rather than and a setter of frameworks. Maybe in one sentence.
Yeah. Actually, in that way, we are just facilitator. We are facilitating the framework. If farmers need to meet the banks, if the banks need to meet people who are investing in different commodities, there is a leadership that is needed. We need to have someone who put together all those elements, and that's the role of government.
Thank you very much. Let's go to one more step before we have everybody join the panel. There's something that has actually been in place for the last 10 years. It's the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, CAADP. Rwanda was one of the forerunners. You were sort of the pioneers. Why did you engage, and what did you gain?
Thank you for the question. Actually, the CAADP, let's say, commitment has been agreed by the president in Maputo in 2003, and all African countries have committed to invest in agriculture in a program called Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, which is CAADP. And that program has principles, and it's clear in terms of which pillars are part of the program. So the signature was in 2003. But the first compact was signed, yes, you mentioned it, in Rwanda in 2007. And that was a commitment and a starting point of the implementation of that program.
So that's 6 years. What have you gained? What has Rwanda gained
Yeah.
from being part of this bigger initiative?
Sure, but first of all, the CADAP is, as I said, is an African agriculture document. When we accept to implement that program, we accept also to align to the principles of CADAP. 6% growth, because agriculture is really a key sector when it comes to, to poverty reduction, to increase income to the population, to food security. Then you have to commit to invest in agriculture. 10% of the public funds need to be put in agriculture. Then you need also to embrace the peer review. It's not only you, it's you and others. You can be evaluated on how you do things. And another principle of CADAP is participation and partnership. It's not only that you have that big program, but you need to do it with others. You can't do it alone. From the low farmer to the donors, to the consumers, they need to participate in that process. Then you need to put in place coordination mechanism that I have mentioned. They are not really, for us, there was not new because those mechanisms was already there. And what we gain is that before we actually start the CADAP, we need to conduct some studies. Why do we want to invest in agriculture? We have worked together with IFPRI to come up with, how we want to invest in agriculture. What are the key areas? What can be the key areas, considering how Rwanda is? What can be the key areas where we can invest? Are we investing in staple crops? Are we investing in export? Are we investing in both staple and export? Are we investing, let's say, in non-agriculture commodities? So then we come up with, priorities. Then how much to invest? So the budget. Then who is part of that investment? That's why that really was a key component of the program, because it was led by the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance understands what is agriculture in the country economic development. Then he leads that fund mobilization to invest the CADAP. So I think with that we have gained a lot, because all the country is aligned to the same priorities when it comes to agriculture, and we understand where we want to go when it comes to agriculture development.
Sounds very challenging, sounds a lot of work, but the first gains have already been reaped. Thank you very much for taking us into that. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope that the alternative, i.e. doing an interview as opposed to a speech.
And what I want to add is that also, is that,
also acceptable.
That, you see, we have started in 2007 as that was a first process of CADAP. Now that the process has ended with our first EDPRS. So now we are busy conducting the second one to align to the second EDPRS.
And you're going to talk about that in a moment.
Sure.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. That was our second keynote speech. And I would like to invite all of the members of my panel onto their assigned spaces, places, and everything else. We've been talking about partnerships, and we've been saying you can't do it alone. Silo thinking is no longer the call of the day. And also finding solutions is no longer sort of bound to silos. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of players here from different backgrounds. Thank you so much that you were here, Jesse, and a good creative day. If you look at our panel, you have on the left and the right side the private sector. In other words, sometimes they think they're the bad guys, but they're not, because, of course, again, as with the leaving the silo thinking, part of the solution is getting everybody involved. David Croft on the left side from Waitrose. Those of you who are not British, it's a very important British food chain. I think a bit more pricey. I know that David will disagree with me, but you get good stuff. And last year, when we had Small Farmers, Big Business, it was absolutely fabulous, because I could actually suddenly have a dialogue with one of the original suppliers in the food chain from Mount Kenya, who then will supply David's people in London. On the right-hand side, Stephen Stefan Tanda. He is the managing board member of Royal DSM, and his hat today will be about nutrition, i.e. enhancing the food that we eat, how to enhance, who to partner with, very important aspect. We'll get a bit closer, we get to the ladies. On the left-hand side, Céline Chaveria, the Director of Advocacy and Campaigns of Oxfam International. She'll be putting a couple of spanners into our working machine, and I'm very much looking forward to her views. Catherine Garetta, Executive Director for Partnerships and External Relations of one of the many donor organizations that are here, Agence Française de Développement. My French is limited, so I will stop talking French right now, AFD. And AFD is concentrating a lot on financial aspects, and you'll be sharing that wisdom with us in a sec. We've already got to know Ernest, which leaves Agri, Mahanyana, and he's got his sleeves wrapped up and rolled up from South Africa. He's got two hats, both for the South African farmers, and he's also part and parcel of the World Farmers Association. So he's the one who's actually, well, his colleagues are actually putting the seeds in the ground and letting them grow. Do you still do that? I never asked you. Do you still have a plot of land and do it yourself? Okay, fine. Very quickly to take you along. 3 minutes each. Everybody's going to get a kick-off question, and then, ladies and gentlemen, everybody can chip in, and we're going to discuss a bit further. Now, we've already heard some of the issues, Céline, I was hoping that you'd throw in the spanner, but first of all, could you just take us along? We said the solution can be there, but what are the obstacles? What are the problems that you're facing from an NGO's point of view, watching all the players trying to operate?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Oxfam has been working with small farmers around the world for 70 years. We are at the front line of the fight for ending poverty and hunger whenever we respond to humanitarian crisis, but as well in our long-term development programs. Hunger is no accident. It is due to the denial of rights, the right to food, the right to decent livelihoods. It is due to power structures and policies, whether they are at the local, the national, and the global level, that are preventing people from exiting poverty. When you take that into account, I think you see the question of partnerships in a different way. Obviously, partnerships are very essential for innovation, for bringing solutions at scale, and for long-term sustainability. But what's really important is to realize that small farmers must be at the heart of any partnerships. We have 500 million farms around the world that are sustaining, providing livelihoods to 1/3 of humanity. And once you bring the small farmers issue into the debate, you clearly see that the core issue for partnerships is the issue of power imbalance. Given that, I think it's very important to say that governments need to really weigh in. We need strong public intervention in the agricultural sector. It is really welcome that on the international agenda, agriculture is back. After 2 lost decades where financing went down, financing is increasing, but it's clearly not where it needs to be. If you look at the Maputo Declaration, only 8 out of the 54 member states of the African Union have actually met their target of 10% of budgetary spending. If you look at the promises made in L'Aquila in 2009 by the G8, according to the G8 Accountability Report, only 51% there is a 51% funding gap. And there is still a lack of coherence. We heard from the Agricultural Commissioner that things have improved. Well, we still, if you look at the money that's spent by industrialized countries, by DAC donors on agriculture, aid to agriculture, it's 10 billion. We're still spending 80 billion on the CAP, and we still have policies like the policy on first generation biofuels, which are causing havoc on the international market. So more needs to be done. More also needs to be done by national governments. if you look at what's happening in many developing countries, you have a lack of coherence between the investment frameworks, the land tenure policies, and also taxation policies. The second point I wanted to make is around the private sector. I think there's an over-reliance, the idea that the private sector is the new solution and will be filling the funding gap on its own without strong intervention from the public sector and also without money from the public sector. And obviously, we need more private investment in agriculture. The FAO estimates that we need 80 billion annually in total investments to keep pace with rising demand. But what we need to look at are three elements. Right now, most of the investment is not targeting those who are the most in need, the poorest. We need to ensure fair conditions of private investment so they actually raise income, resilience, and improve security, food security, not create land grabbing, for instance, which we've seen in many places in the world. And finally, we need to ensure that the business models have at the heart the issue of long-term sustainability and first and foremost climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celine. That was slightly over the time, so next time round a bit faster. Egri, when we talked before this event, we were talking about the role that you see farmers play as and the partnerships that you engage in order to improve the situation both of farmers and also of food supply. How is that shaped in South Africa, and how do you shape it within the context of the World Farming Organization?
Thank you very much, Connie. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I would put it this way. In this particular meeting, I represent both the farmers in South Africa, smallholder farmers in South Africa, and also the farmers of the world. We strongly believe that the tripartite alliance between the farmer associations, the private sector, as well as government, is extremely important for the development or to ensure food security and poverty alleviation in the world. A typical example is what we have done through the World Farmers Organization as well as the German Farmers Union, which is very much involved in working with the farmers of Africa. We are sharing a lot of information. We are sharing, this one now is a farmer-to-farmer. It's a farmer-to-farmer partnership. We are sharing technology transfer. For example, because in Africa we are very small in terms of capacity of our production, there is no one individual farmer who can afford to buy the full mechanization for production. Hence now, with the working with the German Farmers Union, we have taken a note that we can share the farm mechanization implements, the tractors, the implements, and so on, so that you cannot do it alone. In addition to this farmer-to-farmer, we also believe that there is no way that even the farmer organizations themselves can be able to drive the issue of development, either at a country level, at a regional level, even at an international level, without the involvement of the governments. You must understand that the government is there to put policies. The government is there to put laws. The government is there to regulate issues. I mean, we have heard the Director General was talking about the issue of international trade. Those trade laws or regulations cannot be endorsed by governments without the farmers. And you must also understand that the farmers are also business people. The farmers cannot also do alone without the other business partners. Hence, we say this should be a tripartite alliance, but a tripartite alliance which has got common vision. Because if the private sector have got their own direction and vision, and the farmers have got their own direction and vision, obviously, that will be a very big challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. To the point and to the spot. And when you talk about tripartite structures, it almost sounds like the International Labour Organization, which works also on a kind of tripartite structure. So something maybe taken over from another area of cooperation. David, now you can start off taking us into the good world of the private sector. In how far do you actually see yourself and act as a partner to farmers and a partner to maybe governments where you actually get the original foodstuffs from, where the value chains are actually starting?
I think the starting point for us on that, Connie, is firstly to try and understand some of the barriers that farmers face. And realistically, it's often very easy for business to look at an issue and say, well, in a northern context, this is how it would work. But actually, that's not the way it will work in Africa or in the South more generally. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about impact assessments, about baselines, and trying to understand the barriers that farmers might have in terms of adopting what might be better practice that might drive efficiency and ways out of poverty. And there are a range of things, particularly around infrastructure for smallholders, which is a big challenge, and the ability to reach a lot of smallholders. But there's the stuff that Celine talked about, access to credit, land tenure, also things like phytosanitary barriers, where exports are stopped because of bureaucracy, sometimes at an EU level, that prevents smallholders in Africa sending their crop to market. And then there's the technical issues, skills, capability, access to agri-inputs, the R&D pipeline around crops, the whole question of whether you have access to the right and the best planting material and how much that might cost. Simple questions like soil health and degradation, and then the much more complex questions of social issues, how poverty arises, the lack of health and education services, and finally, of course, climate change. Now, they're the reasons why farmers sometimes struggle to engage. And they're the things that we believe that once you've recognized all those issues, you also start to recognize that no single actor can actually tackle each of all those things on their own. And so collaboration is hugely important. And so Waitrose tries to take a very holistic perspective and consider an end-to-end approach from the supply chain network all the way through to our shops and our customers. And we don't see ourselves as consumers of a supply chain, but moreover as a participant in a supply network. And that sort of plays the other way just as much. We don't see rural communities as simple feeds to that supply chain, but as essential participants in that supply chain. And that then tailors how we approach things. So we have three core activities: technical work, where we will look to do farm development, to do continuous improvement activity through our farm assessment systems, where we look at farm management and practice, where we try and improve efficiencies and yield, where we try and reduce waste and improve soil health and water management and land management. The second area is about supply chain and how we develop supply chains and how we look at farmer groups and strengthen relationships and create stronger vertical engagement, and how we do outreach grower development to create collaborative farm groups of smallholders. And then the third area, and perhaps the most important, because it comes down to motivations for farmers and support for farmers, is about the social aspects. Because I don't believe you can have economic upliftment without social upliftment, and you have to move the two agendas forward in parallel. And there it's about strong communication within those supply networks. And that's where our foundation is particularly active, working on training in farming skills, training in rural communities, things like entrepreneurial development, so the community is stronger as a whole, and therefore the supply chain network that it supports is stronger afterwards.
I know you've used up your 3 minutes, so this is a sort of extra. Can you say in one sentence what's in it for you? I mean, the efforts that you're undertaking sound credible and sound wonderful to the community, and maybe Agri will chip in that later. But why do you do it? What's in it for Waitrose?
One sentence. It's about actually a stronger supply network, stronger farms that support that network, and therefore a stronger business from our point of view now and for the long term.
Thank you so much. I'd like to turn to Catherine. Now, I've sort of said that you're our lady for the finances, but maybe you'd like to take a wider view. We've just heard that sort of 80% of agricultural produce around the globe is produced by smallholders. Just as much as Agri was pointing out that production techniques or access to machinery is difficult for smallholders, I would assume that finances are out of an individual's reach. So how would you enable, empower smallholders to get money?
Merci. Bonjour à tous. Il est vrai que pour une institution financière comme l'Agence française de développement, qui intervient en grande majorité en Afrique, le rôle de l'agriculture nous paraît comme complètement fondamental pour assurer une croissance à la fois soutenue, durable et inclusive de l'Afrique. Et donc c'est la raison pour laquelle nous considérons qu'il est absolument nécessaire d'augmenter de manière très substantielle les investissements dans ce secteur en Afrique. Et pour l'AFD, nous sommes fixés comme objectif de doubler la part de l'agriculture dans nos interventions en Afrique d'ici 2016. Alors, cette vision que nous avons de l'agriculture, elle repose en effet sur une conviction qui est que pour l'avenir de l'agriculture africaine, l'acteur fondamental est la petite exploitation familiale et la petite entreprise. Nous considérons que c'est ce modèle qu'il faut encourager et que c'est ce modèle qui permettra à l'Afrique de relever ses grands défis. Je pense à la fois à la sécurité alimentaire, mais également à l'emploi en zone rurale et à la préservation du capital naturel. Alors, comme vous le disiez, Connie, c'est vrai que c'est compliqué pour une institution financière d'atteindre ces petites exploitations, notamment parce que ce sont des acteurs qui sont face à une grande insécurité. On a plusieurs fois évoqué la question foncière et je pense qu'elle est fondamentale, à une grande vulnérabilité aussi face à un certain nombre de risques. Et on est face également, et ça un certain nombre d'entre nous l'ont dit également, face à une grande asymétrie des rapports de force. Alors pour nous, il y a trois orientations qui nous paraissent intéressantes à encourager pour essayer de diminuer ces risques et cette vulnérabilité et cette insécurité. Il y a d'une part de favoriser le regroupement entre ces producteurs, que ce soit sous forme de syndicats, de coopératives, pour justement rétablir un rapport de force plus équilibré. Il y a d'autre part également l'objectif de renforcer le soutien au commerce et au marché de proximité dans une approche territoriale, parce que nous considérons que les acteurs, plus on est en aval de la chaîne et dans la chaîne notamment de la production locale, plus les investissements pourront être opérer en pratique. Et puis la troisième recommandation que nous faisons sur ce plan, c'est de favoriser une approche de type contractuel, ce qu'on appelle en anglais le contract farming, parce qu'il nous semble que notamment dans les cultures d'exportation, mais pas seulement, c'est cette approche qui intègre à la fois un producteur, une entreprise et une institution financière, qui est en fait un modèle qui fonctionne et qui permettra de lever les obstacles que nous rencontrons aujourd'hui. J'ai notamment en tête un exemple d'un projet que nous soutenons depuis 15 ans au Ghana, et dans le domaine de l'EVA, et qui permet de mettre en relation à la fois une institution financière internationale comme l'AFD, une banque locale, 10 000 producteurs, un industriel, enfin une entreprise, et une organisation professionnelle qui apporte un certain nombre d'appuis. Et nous voyons, par exemple, dans cet exemple, que la banque, finalement, elle prête aux producteurs. On arrive à trouver un système qui permet à la banque de prêter aux producteurs et non pas aux autres maillons de la chaîne. Donc c'est ce type d'approche que nous voulons encourager, avec comme objectif, comme je le répétais, de développer de manière très substantielle les activités menées par les petites exploitations et les petites entreprises en Afrique. Merci.
Just very quickly, it's loans and not grants.
C'est une combinaison des deux. Peut-être qu'on aura l'occasion d'y revenir dans la deuxième session, mais pour nous, il est important de développer la bancarisation de l'agriculture africaine et de la petite agriculture africaine, mais ceci suppose d'être accompagné de subventions.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. We have agreed that Stefan is last in this round. So Ernest, I'll come back to you. I interrupted you when you were sort of trying to go forward and say these are the sort of the second phase, and these are our new challenges. In view of what you've just heard now, where would you say all of these players would also play a role in the next step for Rwanda?
All these players, of course, will play a very big role. Because as I said, this second EDPRS, Economic Development and Poverty Reduction Strategy, we have highlighted the role of private sector. For the first, let's say for the first CADAP, the investment plan of the first CADAP was highlighting public finance. So now, for the second one, we want to make sure that private sector plays a key role, because agriculture sector is totally private. Government is there to facilitate. Government is there to put in place right policies, right framework, and key infrastructures. But at the end, farmers and private sector, they are there to actually implement our agriculture strategy. And we'll be there as government to facilitate them. And where it is not possible, we'll come to the PPPs, in the public-private partnerships, in order to de-risk the agriculture sector, in order to de-risk the different investment that the private sector need to put in place. But the right way we want to go is to strengthen partnerships straight away from the farmers and private sector. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Now, Stefan, finally, your role. I said that your hat is sort of Mr. Nutrition in this round, based on the fact that it is not just enough to have something to eat, but it's the question of the quality of the food that you eat. Now, of course, if your sort of basic staple diet is rice, it would be quite good if the rice had enough vitamins and aspects, and I believe the terminology is micronutrients in it, to supply that person for the whole day with everything he or she needs. A, is that doable? B, can that be paid for? And C, do we need companies like yours? Or would we just sort of need to go back to maybe an earlier way of feeding because people were not malnourished before? And all of that in 3 minutes.
Thanks, Connie. Nice challenge. First, let me correct your math, if I may. You made the first 3 rows stand up, and that is right. Those are that's the billion that doesn't know where their next meal is coming from, i.e. the calories that keep them alive. But really, you should have made the first 6 rows stand up, because we're really talking about 2 billion people who are malnourished, who don't have the micronutrients, sufficient micronutrients in their diet. And that is a key issue. And in fact, from a development point of view, it is, there's the key issue. And here's why. Only in the last 3-4 years, in fact, it started with the Lancet series in 2008, has it been understood that we all have been programmed metabolically in the womb of our mother, and our physical, but most importantly our mental development happens mostly, the brain development, eyesight development, in the first 1,000 days, so from conception to the second birthday. And the shocking insight and the shocking burden of knowledge is that if you do not hit this window, and often those window in the development of the fetus and the child is only a few weeks for certain developments, if you don't have the right nutrition at that stage, it cannot be reversed later in life. So think about this as a parent. If you have not hit certain windows, you cannot fix it later. It's a tremendous burden of knowledge. That burden of knowledge has, over the last 4 or 5 years, started to sink in with the development community, with the United Nations agencies, and more with governments. Economists say that nutritional intervention in development is by far the most returning intervention, 15 to 1 in very cold economist terms, in terms of saved healthcare costs, in terms of additional productivity for the economy. It's the most efficient intervention in development. But I would put it more basic. We're talking about the right to life. What about the right to have an equal start in life and not be condemned to a trajectory of not being able to learn in school as well, not being physically stunted, and being prone to disease? So this is the issue in nutrition. Now, what is being done about it? I fully agree with Celine that governments, when it comes to food and nutrition, governments have to take the lead. Nothing happens in food unless the government takes the lead. And it has to be a local solution. Now, I'm happy to say 41 countries have signed up to the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, also abbreviated SUN. And we see more and more implementation plans being put forward and being started to work on. Now, coming to the private sector, if I may, with all respect, all the food you eat every day comes from the private sector. So to say that the private sector should not have a role in this is not possible. And Agri was saying very rightly, farmers are business people too. They want to earn a living. They want to sell their harvest. That is also the private sector. What we do as DSM is work a lot with public-private partnerships. We started 7 years ago with the World Food Program. The World Food Program indeed used to supply starch grains with no micronutrients. Today, they supply more and more things like Super Cereal Plus, fortified energy biscuits, for example, now with the Typhoon. The first product in were fortified biscuits, put in micronutrient powders. So we've developed a whole array of products together. We've partnerships with one of the hosts here, the GIZ on rice fortification, with World Vision International. So more and more actors get in the game to start to build value chains at the local level. Particularly since Ernest is here.
Can I interject here? As much as we do emphasize the issue of this tripartite alliance, our experience, not only in Africa, I understand even in other parts of the world, the private sector in this partnership, in most cases, is always having a hidden agenda. And their hidden agenda is to ensure that their shareholders get a bigger slice in the whole relationship that is happening between government and the farmer and the civil society. A typical example that has happened in my own country, whilst I'm talking to you, a private company from a country that I'm not going to mention, I'm sure some of those people are here. They went to our country, buy out the entire agricultural infrastructure. That infrastructure was built by the government of South Africa for years. Infrastructure which include the what we call the silos, the storage facility. Mm-hmm. And our very big worry, is this for the food security of the African people, or is it the food security of the people of that country that I'm not going to mention by name? Those are the biggest problems when we talk about this partnership, that there must be no hidden agendas. There must be common vision from three parties that are involved in this partnership.
Thank you so much for sharing also your experience.
Now,
I have to
Stefan come in here.
Just one sentence to sort of intervene. And also, I do actually believe right at the moment that there are two different issues being mixed. But Stefan.
No, I actually fully agree with Agri on that particular case, since we discussed it at dinner. I want to mention the example of Rwanda, since Ernest is also on the panel, where we do exactly that work with multiple stakeholders, taking local harvest, processing that locally, and creating fortified foods for the local population. Mm-hmm. No takeover, I agree, don't worry. But you need private sector investment to make these nutritious foods.
Okay, thank you so much. I know who I want to bounce off who at this discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, I've made a promise to you. It's up to you to sort of chip in. Can I please have another 4 minutes to just sort of, get a couple of things straight here, and then it's up to you. So please make up your minds what you want to answer, what you want to ask, and then we'll have about 5 to 6 questions from you, throw at the panel, and develop it further. First of all, Agri, Would you do a treaty with Waitrose and say under the conditions that David has spelled out, i.e. sort of, for the local farmer population, yes, we agree that our members can do a contract?
For sure. I will, because I know that we cannot drive our own development alone.
Yeah.
We need other people to support us. But I will give him some conditions. I must be, as a farmer, I am also a member of my local cooperative. Our motto says, a vehicle of farmers driven by the farmers for the farmers. We cannot allow him to dictate the terms of how this vehicle must be driven. We will have to tell him how we want it. And then if he wants to come to the game, he must come in on our own terms, not on his own terms, unfortunately.
So it's a question of negotiation.
It's a question of negotiating the terms.
It sounds, Celine, with farmers like that, you're out of business. You don't have to worry for them. David, how would you chip in? How do you tackle in the, was it 40 countries that you work in? How do you tackle critical farmers? How do you convince NGOs like Oxfam that are standing up for the rights of the farmers that what you do is actually A, serious, and B, for the better good of all?
I think, having had experience of working and running and developing a £50 million programme in West Africa, where it was the collaboration between a government, UNDP, 3 different NGOs, farmers, and the private sector. Agri talks about hidden agendas. Every party in that collaboration will have different perspectives. And the question is, can you come together as a partnership which is about mutual benefit? And it's not a case of one partner in that collaboration driving for its goal and only its goal. It's about how much can you compromise and how much can you share approaches. And my experience is if you are up front and say this is what each actor needs to try and get out of it, then you can do that. Now, I think the question really is where would business be stretched to? And if you can imagine a series of concentric circles with trade, and that's why business is involved, it's about trade for business. Very rarely is it purely an altruistic approach, if I'm honest, and if you want to get scale investment involved, it's about trade. And the trade point is the centre of that series of concentric circles, and where different actors come in is at tiers 2 and 3, and it's how you make those different actors work together so that trade works effectively, and that adds social and economic upliftment for the farmers at the heart of the supply network.
Celine, would you subscribe to a supply chain network, as David has pointed out, i.e. not just sort of one recipient dictating the terms, as Agri fears and says he's not going to play with, but as sort of part and parcel of a partnership agreement?
Well, Oxfam is actually preparing a new report where we're calling on the 10 biggest food and beverage companies in the world to look again at their approach on climate change.
Yeah.
And this is directly related to what you're saying. We've seen, I think many of those food companies are obviously aware of the risk that climate change is posing to their supply chains. But there are still, many of them are still thinking, okay, well, if one country is facing a catastrophic crop loss, I'll just switch to another supplier. We need to get out of that sort of thinking to think about the long-term sustainability and vibrance of all the suppliers. And once you start thinking about that long term of partnership, when you start looking at the real power issues, then only you can actually, I think, do good business. Because ultimately what we want is companies thinking that it is a competitive advantage for them to be treating the suppliers well, because the public will buy more of their products, but also because they'll have a more secure supply chain.
Ernest, last question in this round, and maybe a quick question. Are you mad to let a company like Stefan's in, or is there actually also a hidden agenda on your side and say there's a win-win situation and we actually want that particular technology, help, assistance, and maybe a gain for our people?
Yeah, I will not say that it's a hidden agenda, because the company is actually implementing and is aligned to the priority of the country. As it was mentioned, the company we actually provide the fortified food. Those fortified food comes from the commodities that are produced by our farmers. The company will give the market to our farmers and provide the food that is needed by Rwandans. So we are facing that problem of malnutrition. They can sell to Rwanda. They can also sell to the region. That's a problem that is that you can meet in the region as well. But the good thing here is that they are working for, it's a business, they are working for interests, but also it's aligned to our country priorities. And I think for that, it's not hidden. And because there is that partnership, we meet, discuss, and hold each other accountable. That's all.
Thank you so much. We could go on here, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sure that you're bursting with a couple of questions. So there are two charming young ladies equipped with microphones. They will be coming to you. On the left-hand side from you, it's the blonde lady, and the gentleman in the middle and the lady on that side will be doing the kickoff. You, sir, the next one, and then the gentleman at the back. So we've got 4 people taking the question. Sir, do you have the microphone already? Oh.
Le micro est passé devant moi, je profite de l'occasion.
Okay, fine. Since you grabbed the microphone. Did we
C'est
talk about land grabbing?
Nyang Ibrahima, je viens de la Mauritanie et j'ai entendu les orateurs sur la question concernant l'agriculture. Ma question, c'était plutôt qu'il y a quelques années, on a remarqué que la grande agriculture, le financement de business sur la grande agriculture est un échec partout en Afrique, ce qu'on a remarqué. Et qu'actuellement, la tendance est plutôt sur la petite agriculture, l'agriculture familiale, où on a vu qu'il y a des technologies qui sont développées et qui ont donné fruit. Donc sur cela, j'aimerais poser la question, c'est de savoir exactement aujourd'hui, pour l'AFD, quel est ce que l'AFD réserve pour ces petits agriculteurs, surtout pour l'agriculture familiale, concernant le financement. On sait très bien qu'au sein de certains pays, il y a des ONG locales qui s'activent et qui travaillent avec des exploitants de petites familles et qui arrivent à faire des bénéfices. Aujourd'hui, est-ce que ces exploitants ont accès au financement de l'AFD? Merci.
Thank you very much. Could you hand on the microphone to the gentleman? Whilst you're getting the microphone, can we have the lady on the right? Let her go first, then you, and then we have the other 2 players.
Good morning, my name is Julia Bretenou. I work for InfoDev, which is a global partnership program in the World Bank that focuses on enabling the creation and growth of innovative small and medium-sized enterprises in the developing world. In the exchanges, I just felt a bit like there was the farmers on one side, and then the private sector was more seen as the big global companies. But there are a lot of processing companies in developing countries, especially in Africa. So my question actually to you all is, do you work with these agro-processors in developing countries, and what is your relationship with them? And do you see also a big opportunity, like we do, in working more with them so that we can actually process products locally and really capture the added value locally?
Thank you so much for that intervention. The gentleman in the middle, please.
Hello, my name is Bayo Mobi, probably better known as Adebayo Ajit Mobi. And it's interesting that it's an EU conference, obviously with a focus on Africa. And we have on the panel the cooperatives that are mainly Europeans. And we also have on the panels the policy makings and the farmers who are mainly African. But I think there's a big point that we're missing here. There are lots of Africans that are based in Europe, that were born in Europe, that really do understand the processes and understand the needs of the people in Africa. And I think it's essential that to engage with consultants like that so that they can actually advise better the cooperatives that wanted to make a difference to Africa, but also at the same time that they can put the best interest of the farmers and the traders and the market women that really truly sell these products on the agenda. Because otherwise we stand the risk of having a situations whereby we will no longer be able to plant our own seeds. We would have to buy seeds from corporations, and it would defeat the whole purpose of actually empowering small-scale farmers.
Thank you so much. There was a gentleman here and the gentleman in the last row.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is David Nyange. I come from Tanzania. Yeah, I would like to contribute to the discussion on the role of the private sector, particularly agribusiness in Africa. I know this is a contentious issue and is being very much debated in Africa, but having lived in Africa for the past 20 years, I think Africa really needs, private sector investment in agriculture. There have been underinvestment in value addition, even though production of agriculture has been increasing, but lack of markets, lack of processing has been creating cycles of high and low prices. And this is really negatively impacting farmers. But on the consumer's side, Africa has become one of the major importers of food commodities. In 2011 alone, Africa spent $52 billion importing various food commodities. These are food commodities that are produced in Africa, but they are not demanded because their value has not been added. In other words, Africa is exporting its jobs to countries like Europe and Asia, so Africa really needs private sector investment. However, FDI needs to be strategic so that it creates the horizontal and the vertical linkages with the local industries in Africa. We have some good successes, particularly in the telecom sector, where the FDI has resulted in development of large and small enterprises. When you drive around most cities in Africa, you see small shops like M-Pesa, for money exchanges. These are small businesses, thousands of them, as the result of FDI. So my suggestion is investment needed to be strategic. The industry needs to be structured so that it creates horizontal linkages with the local industry. Just one last point. Currently, there are initiatives developing in Africa on the corridor approach. For example, in Tanzania, the Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania, in which there have been clusters that are being created where a private commercial farm becomes a hub linked with the farmers, smallholder farmers, in form of outgrowers schemes and contract farming. Another approach that have been used is where a farmers cooperative would buy an equity in a commercial investment, no matter how small it is, but it gives farmers confidence, a sense of ownership, and it helps to address that issue of thinking that maybe there's a hidden agenda, because farmers can sit in the board of the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for these two aspects, and that gentleman is going to take it away, and you're the last in this round.
Bonjour, je suis Hakim Amoudi de l'Institut national de la recherche agronomique de Paris. Bon, je voulais poser une question aux panélistes et notamment à Mme Garetta de l'AFD, parce que jusqu'à présent, effectivement, tout le monde est d'accord sur le fait que les partenariats publics-privés sont très importants. La chose qui a été la moins discutée, je pense, c'est les externalités positives, on l'espère tous, des partenariats publics-privés sur l'ensemble de l'économie, c'est-à-dire en termes d'effet d'entraînement. Ma question, c'est de savoir, est-ce que finalement ça a été posé, est-ce que les initiatives, qui soient de soutien, de prêt ou des partenariats publics-privés, ont été posées dans cette perspective? Est-ce que, par exemple, l'AFD pose la question de l'efficacité, pas uniquement de la relation bilatérale, mais de l'efficacité globale? Alors, je vais être un peu plus concret. C'est-à-dire, quand on fait, par exemple, un partenariat public-privé à un acteur de l'aval d'une filière, est-ce qu'on fait en sorte que des contraintes dans le mandat soient fixées de telle façon à ce qu'il s'implique un peu plus de façon contractuelle dans l'organisation du système de production en amont? Est-ce que pour les marchés domestiques, on peut profiter éventuellement des savoir-faire acquis par exemple par les exportateurs et autres filières des GMS, etc. Alors, quand je vous parle de ça, je pense bien entendu aux interactions entre les filières d'exportation dans les pays en développement et les marchés domestiques qui peuvent effectivement profiter de l'essor qui ne vient finalement qu'à travers un long processus de soutien à ces filières d'exportation. Est-ce qu'il ne faut pas un jour penser à les mettre à contribution pour rehausser le niveau d'offre locale, sécurité alimentaire au sens quantitatif, et élever éventuellement le niveau de qualité des produits qu'on offre aux consommateurs africains? Voilà, merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your very pointed and great questions. I would actually like to wrap it up from the back, talking about public-private partnerships, and actually was an issue that I raised with the organizers, saying that in other areas of development cooperation, they were questioned. In my discussions, I found out that apparently there is a greater value in the agricultural sector. Now, Ernst, you actually pointed out that your country is carrying out a couple of public-private partnerships, and that in fact, now that you're sort of looking to the private sector in the next phase, more as an investor, public-private partnerships must become even more important. Why? What's the benefit?
Yeah, sure. As I said, PPP is really key for our development. And before we get there, we actually set up an institution that is responsible for that. We have an institution which is in charge of investment promotion, and we have a dedicated unit of PPP. So if there is a project which is a PPP kind of, it is discussed in that unit of our institution called Rwanda Development Board. And then you discuss and agree on different principles and different conditions, and you come with a deal that is accepted by both private and government. So it's really important. Government alone cannot finance the development of the country, but we need private sector to support and to finance the development. But also that partnership needs not only that private people that can define that big private company, but also we need the partnership from the producers, those farmers. And we put in place a right framework so that those farmers can participate. Starting for the land policy. I think it's really something that is crucial in agriculture. If you want to invest in agriculture, you need to have a very good policy on land. For the case of Rwanda, the land policy gives ownership to the beneficiaries. So we started our land policy in 2006. We've conducted a land use master plan. All farmers or beneficiaries of land have their titles, and actually we are seeing a very good positive externality because of that land policy. Because farmers can give their land as guarantee and access finance. When you are in that, let's say, contract farming, farmers come very strong because they have their own land. They can access finance because they have their titles. And the private company actually partner with the farmer without any fear, because he comes with a strong partner, and he can easily invest in farmers, because those farmers they have their own land. They can decide on what they can do on their land. Another thing is that you can easily come up, enter as a financing institution, because you are dealing with people who have guarantees, who knows what they want to do. Then there is government. I want to come to the partnership. For us, it's not only contract farming. We call it facilitated contract farming, because government needs to be there as well. Farmers and private company, yes, they have their contract, but it is always better to be facilitated by someone from the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also to my panelists, please, short answers, because we've got one common enemy, and that enemy is not sitting on here, it's time.
Connie.
Stefan, and then Agri.
I wanted to tie some of the question and comments together. I think we really need to emphasize the importance of building up local value chains that connect farmers to local food processors, to local food distribution, including retail. And we have many examples where we work with local millers. I mentioned the work we do with World Vision, but also the project with Rwanda, where you work with local food processors, because in the end, if you have the local food processing industry successful, they can supply nutritious product, they can export, they can bring income into the country. The second point I wanted to make, because Mr. Halkan is here in the first row, and we are at the European event, the European Commission, EU, is really now the number one donor in this area, and has really picked up nutrition as a key area, and an action plan is being developed, and he's driving this forward. So I think I want this point of the importance of nutrition to really stand out. We can squabble about the private sector or not, but this is an issue that needs to be solved.
Thank you so much. Agree?
I think the only message that I would like to leave in the European Union is that there is a consensus that the private-public partnership is the way to go. Now, how do you make this public-private partnership to work? Ensure that the farmer associations and cooperatives are capacitated enough so as to be able to participate equally in this marriage. It must not be a marriage dominated by another big bully or big boy. Ensure that these farmers, they are properly skilled to be able to participate in this relationship. That's one of the strongest points that I would like to see, so that the emphasis should be focusing in bringing capacity, not only farmers at a small scale national, even I'm referring to the World Farmer Organization. They must be able to participate in world trade issues because they know what they are talking about. It's not only governments who represent them. They must also be involved. They must also be able to talk on their own behalf, not be represented by the bureaucrats and the NGOs.
I agree. Just a very quick question. You said what you don't want, and we fully understand. Can you just sort of reformulate it and say what you want and what you do in order to achieve that? How do you see yourself as a negotiator in the public-private partnerships? How do you do it? Or how would you want to do it in future?
Well, I'm not sure whether I was not clear enough.
Maybe I'm blonde.
These smallholder farmers, they've got a multitude of challenges. That one is known by everybody. And one of the issues, they are not able to participate fully and freely in these negotiations because they don't have information. Provide them the relevant information.
Who is supposed to provide the information?
Well, these other two, I'm referring these other two partners, which is government and the private sector. This is what they must do. Give them, facilitate, give them the relevant information so that they must be able to also debate on their own issues. Empower them so that they must not be sent a messenger, which is government or business. I like what you said. You were very honest, David, when you said this must be a mutual benefit because we have got a hidden agenda. You want your hidden agenda also to be addressed. I like that because we have been very honest and frank about that.
David, quickly, then the two ladies, then we're going to do a final round, and I know that you're already sitting, as we would say in Germany, on hot coals or on bad veggies, as we could say.
Let me try and be brief, Connie. I think that we shouldn't see public-private partnerships as a universal panacea. They operate where there is an effective trade opportunity. They don't operate well in a post-conflict or a post-crisis situation, and they're not a cure in that situation. Where there is trade, whether it's international or local, then there is an opportunity, and that's why, working with DFID, I helped to set up the new Global Value Change Initiative that they're now trialling with the first £4 million of investment from the UK government. But more importantly, and to Agri's point, it is about mutual benefit. And that cuts both ways. I remember an apocryphal story when I was asked by an international quasi-government agency that I shouldn't mention, basically to put £50 million into a pot that they would then tell me how to spend. Now, from a business point of view, that's not a partnership. So it does cut both ways. Sometimes partnerships are not mutually beneficial, and that's what they have to be. If we can make that work, then actually you can move the discussion forward.
Catherine, combine your last words with what you wanted to say, also Céline.
Yeah. Okay. Merci. Il y a une première question qui concernait directement l'Agence française de développement et qui est comment on arrive à permettre aux petites exploitations d'avoir accès à des ressources financières. En fait, je pense qu'il y a deux grandes manières d'arriver d'atteindre cet objectif. Il y a d'une part, et c'est ce que fait l'Agence française de développement, c'est d'encourager, de soutenir le système financier local pour diversifier son offre financière, pour répondre aux besoins spécifiques des petites exploitations. Et je pense notamment au développement de la microfinance, au développement de la garantie, du leasing, enfin de diversifier en fait pour que l'offre financière soit bien adaptée aux besoins des petites exploitations et également des entreprises. Quelqu'un a évoqué la question des entreprises de transformation et je pense qu'il est important que ces acteurs puissent aussi avoir un meilleur accès aux ressources financières de type bancaire. Et puis l'autre manière d'arriver à cet objectif, c'est aussi de rendre la demande plus bancable, c'est-à-dire d'apporter des soutiens en termes d'aider ces exploitations à mieux présenter leurs dossiers et leur apporter du conseil en gestion, en économie, pour à la fois jouer sur l'offre de financement et sur la demande de financement. Un dernier point qui répond à la question sur les externalités positives de l'approche contractuelle. Il est clair que c'est bien parce qu'il y a des externalités positives d'une approche plus intégrée des acteurs que ce type d'approche doit être accompagné et que c'est bien parce qu'il y a des externalités qu'il faut à la fois mobiliser des prêts et des dons, parce que c'est la combinaison de ces prêts et des dons qui permet à ces externalités de pouvoir être les plus importantes. Et ça, on a des différents exemples qui montrent que les subventions permettent en fait de rendre l'approche contractuelle plus favorable en termes de durabilité, en termes de sécurisation justement des conventions qui permettent de financer de l'appui. Et là, je voudrais juste mettre l'accent sur le rôle des organisations professionnelles pour assurer un certain nombre de fonctions d'appui, d'expertise auprès des différents acteurs de la filière. Et ça, c'est à travers une bonne combinaison intégrée des différents outils de financement que nous arrivons à cela. Merci.
Merci bien. Et Céline, also with your last words, please, sort of maybe with an exclamation mark.
Yeah, so two roles I think that NGOs can play in making sure that public-private partnerships are actually delivering for the poorest people. I think Oxfam works, for instance, supporting and leveraging innovations with the most excluded members of society who have a successful horticultural program with women in Rwanda, which we are bringing to scale with a partnership with IFAD, microfinance institutions, and the government of Rwanda. But we have also another role to play, which is the role of watchdog when things are not going so well. And I'll just have one example. In 2012, the G8 created the New Alliance. What a promising title. 3 billion investment and purportedly getting 50 million people out of poverty in selected African countries. Today, in the Leadership Council of the New Alliance, there are no producer organizations. There are no plans to include small and medium enterprises, and there is no financial support for third-party independent monitoring. These are the things that need to stop to make sure that when precious money from governments and private sector actors are actually delivering for people in poverty. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to stay put because we're just going to get the heat on, which means that Jean-Pierre Alkin is going to provide us with this, his last words, from the side of DEFCO. We had the Agricultural Commissioner represented. Now we have the Commissioner for Development represented. Jean-Pierre, take it away. We are in your back, but we're positively in your back.
I'm pleased to hear it. So I'm Jean-Pierre Alkin. I'm working in DEFCO, where I'm in charge of food security, agriculture, and nutrition. I'm here to do the closing remark, and I will try to link the dots which are on the roll-up. We've been speaking about feed the change, with for me 3 key words: resilience, nutrition, and private sector. For the person who are here, who were there last year, the communication on resilience was just warm out of the printer. And we drafted this communication based on challenges which have been mentioned right now. First thing is that there are still 900 million people who are hungry on the planet. That's quite a challenge. We are also aware that 170 million children are suffering from stunting. Poverty is still highly localized in the rural world, and there is a whole issue about resource scarcity linked to climate change, land degradation, but also population growth. Whenever we speak about land degradation, one of the solutions is often, one of the key solutions is land governance, land policy. And during the last years, whenever we were engaging with government about land policies, land reform, they were often telling us, we are going to leave it for the next government. We have heard that there was not enough progress on that. Yes, if we look at the MDG report, the topics I mentioned are the ones which are lagging behind. Among also the issues, there was the issue of imbalance of power between farmers and farmers in developing countries in particular, and the market. And we've seen it also whenever we have been discussing about food price volatility. Food security, agriculture has been also neglected by donors. This was highly recognized, but we have also heard the wake-up calls. And that's very important, and I would like just to remind a few things that have taken place since last year. Last year, we were just, as I mentioned, the resilience policy being printed, and I'm very pleased to be in charge of the team which drafted the policy, but we were at the same time also working on Agir and Share, which were the 2 initiatives which were set up by the international community to help countries in the Horn of Africa and in the Sahel to address unprecedented drought. Those initiatives have been, to some extent, a success. We have been avoiding disaster. And if we could do that, it was the combination of 3 factors: evidences, political recognition of the challenge, and action. And we can be pleased to see that we have not seen massive issue in both regions, that people have been able to, most of the people have been able to survive the drought. Still, we may wonder if we have been achieving the purpose of the resilience communication. Is it about being able to survive a crisis, or being able to be better prepared so that whenever the next crisis arrives, they can cope with the crisis? And when I say they, it starts with the families, it is going up to the communities and the countries. We have also been hearing about nutrition. And there again, I would like to take the same 3 components to show progresses. Although nutrition has been there for decades, unnoticed. And it is thanks to scientists, it is thanks also to civil society organizations, but also to partner countries that nutrition has been climbing up to the top of the agenda. And it is something very important. We are now aware of the cost of undernutrition. I mean the humanitarian cost. 3 million children dying each year from undernutrition. This is thanks to evidences provided by the Lancet series. We have been also hearing about the economic cost, And some scientists are estimated that up to 13% of the GDP for some countries. So this is really an economic challenge. But now, what is also very much impressive for me is the way it has been taken on board by partner countries. We see that 43 of them have joined the Sun. And that's really something which is a political momentum and a political recognition of something which is considered by us as a social injustice. The fact that the care a child is receiving during the 1,000 first days of his life are going to be determining his whole life. So this is something which is really taken on board. On the EU side, we've been reacting strongly to that. For the resilience aspect, I would just remind that in 2012, we did commit nearly 1.5 billion to food security and agriculture. It is an unprecedented amount. It is a fifth of our development assistance, so this is by far the biggest sector of cooperation. But we also did something else, which was much more much newer for a development perspective. We've been looking at 50 internationally agreed indicators highlighting the importance of agriculture in the economy, the vulnerability of countries, the level of chronic food insecurity at population level, at household level, the issue of undernutrition, to draw a map of the 52 countries which are in chronic food insecurity. And we've been engaging with those countries to say, well, we believe that we have a challenge that we need to address all together. And this has been quite a tremendous success. We have seen that most governments in those countries have said, yes, we have a challenge, and we cannot wait for the next food crisis to start handling the challenge. We want to work with you in a long-term cooperation, and we want food security to be a focal sector in our development framework. And you know that we are developing right now what we call the National Indicative Programs for 2014-2020. So this has been a tremendous result. In addition, we've been also working with countries where we believe that agriculture can be an engine for growth. We've identified 16 where the EU is also a key player, and we engage on the same way, stating we believe that agriculture is an engine of growth that deserves more attention. Are you wishing to work with us? At the end, we have now 54 countries which are selecting or proposing to select agriculture, food and nutrition security as a focal sector. So that's really a major step forward to have a more evidence-based programming. For nutrition, just one word on the challenge. Commissioner Peebles is really committed on nutrition. And he has decided also there to really change the way donors are acting on that. He decided, I don't want to start discussing about technical modalities before we decide about what is our goal and what is the level of ambition. So he wanted to have a clear goal and an outstanding commitment from the European Union. And he committed the EU to contribute to reduce the number of stunted children by 7 million by 2025. For me, this is the first time a donor has put first the impact and afterwards said, I'm the political master, and now I want the service to align, to develop the policy, to develop the action plan to make sure that we are going to meet the commitment. And this is something which is incredibly motivating for colleagues at headquarters, but mostly at field level, to engage with partner countries to say, how are we going to together to work on this challenge? Now, the point which is very often on discussion, and I will be short, yes, okay, is whenever we are speaking about the private sector, is this the second phase of the same coin with resilience of nutrition, or is it a new policy which is competing with the two first one I just mentioned? If I hear about farmers' organizations, they are not satisfied by being told, well, you are a subsistence farmer today, we are going to help you going through the next crisis, and you will be a subsistence farmer next year. They want to become business partners. And this is where we believe that we should help those family farmers to become what we call commercial family farmers, to get out of subsistence farming. That's something very important. And whenever we speak about that, we certainly need then to see the way we may connect with the private sector, starting with the local private sector, but also the international one. This is why also we are very committed to also work on drivers for those for those family farmers to be more sustainable on an economical point of view, notably by working much more on land governance, and we have been extremely surprised to see now the very strong commitment from developing countries in general and African countries in particular on this issue. We launched an initiative which was very successful. We've been working very much to strengthen farmers' organization, and this is something that has really showed great result. We're at the start. We are just right now launching or finalizing the contracting of a new initiative on that. We've been receiving a lot of political support from all actors, the farmers, the government, and also the private sector. I need to really stop there? Okay. So for me, at the end of the day, to be sure that private sector is really the second part of the second phase of the same coin, we certainly need to make sure that whatever policy we are supporting involving the private sector, we ensure the right balance of power between the farmers' organization and the private sector. And also we clearly understand that whenever we speak about private sector, it has a lot of disparity. And that's something very important. We cannot call the private sector as one single entity. We have small companies, big companies, some are really, I would say, development driven by the commitment of the leaders, shareholders, and some are maybe more driven by what they are bringing back as a benefit to the shareholders. So those are the two key lessons I take with me, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, and thank you also for being short. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please give my absolutely fantastic panelists also an applause in this last applause? Yes, 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 you can do more. Thank you very much. I wish we'd had another half an hour to sort of bring forward a couple of the ideas. I hope that you can race to your next appointments, and I know that we have to quickly leave because the next group is going to come in. Thank you so much for your attention. Have a great day here at the European Development Days.